All right, so welcome everyone, welcome back, welcome new people, welcome to Drisha, welcome everyone on Facebook. We're so happy to be learning together today. Today is the second class in the series on Heschel's Transformative Hasidism with Dr. Dror Bondi. Just a quick introduction to those of you who haven't been here. Dror Bondi is dedicated to bringing Abraham Joshua Heschel's thought to Israel, translating his words into Hebrew and transforming Israel by his spirit. Dror has a doctorate in Jewish thought from Bar Ilan University, and we are so thankful for having him with us. Today we'll continue reading through Heschel's work to better understand how his engagement with Hasidism informed his personal outlook. If you would like to speak at any time, especially when the time is given for questions, you can simply unmute. You can also type here in the chat box or Zoom, or you can write a comment if you're watching us live on Facebook. We would love to hear from you as well, our Facebook viewers. If you're an attendee now, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. You would still be able to keep your video off and also keep yourself muted if you choose to. But the benefit of being a panelist is that then if you do want to ask a question, you'll be able to unmute, or if you do want to show us your smiley face, you'll be able to do that as well. So giving everyone a chance to do that right now. And with that, I'll turn this to you, Dror.
Thank you so much. In our previous class, I spoke about Heschel's interpretation of Hasidism as theological approach. Yes, how he believes that the secret of Hasidut is the dialogue between God and man, God and human being, and how we combine the approach of Baal Shem Tov and the approach of the Kotzker Rebbe by this dialogical approach. The Baal Shem Tov always sees the world from God's perspective, while the Kotzker brought the human perspective, and together Heschel suggests us a philosophical and theological experience of dialogue, the dialogue between God and the human being. This was our previous class, and today I want to speak about Heschel's methodological approach, which he developed, which he brought from Hasidism, and also imply in his learning of the Bible, of the Torah. The method is much more important than the content, as we know, and Heschel was deeply aware about the importance of the method. Heschel wanted to suggest us an alternative approach, but if you continue to use the same method which you used before Heschel, it is very hard to understand him. The challenge is to open yourself to his method. And today I want to speak about his Hasidic method of learning, how he understood this way of learning from the Hasidic sources, and how he developed his own approach from this approach in order to read even the Bible, even the Torah. Let's see the sources. And if you know me, I always grateful if someone can help us and read the text instead of my Israeli accent with English accent, American accent. And does someone want to be the first to read the first quote from Heschel's a conversation with school principals of Solomon Schechter. And yes, Emily, you open your
Yes,
mic.
yes, I'll be happy to read.
Thank you, thank you.
Must I say to you personally that this has been my major challenge ever since I began working on my dissertation. That is, how to maintain a Jewish way of thinking. Since that day, I consider this to be my major effort. We live in a very strange situation today, probably more so than even in his time, derech hagav. We are essentially trained in a non-Jewish world. We are inclined in non-Jewish Jewish terms.
Okay.
I am not discouraging exposure to non-Jewish world. I am merely indicating that it is not biblical thinking. It is not rabbinic thinking. It is not Hasidic thinking. It is not Jewish thinking. A non-Jewish philosophy is fine, but we would also like to have in our thinking a Jewish view of things.
Thank you. Yes, Heschel is here in a conversation with school principals, tried to explain them that the deepest challenge of Jewish education is not to convey, to teach Jewish knowledge, but to teach the students how to think, not what, but how. Not what is the content, not to teach only a Jewish content, but also to teach a Jewish way of thinking. What is Jewish way of thinking? This is, yes, Heschel considered it as his major effort, yes? And we usually think about the philosophy of Heschel. We think about the content, what he tried to say. But Heschel here say to this group of principals, please listen not only to what I say, but also, and much more important, to how I say, how I read, what is my approach to the Jewish sources. That the challenge is not only to teach the sources, but the challenge is to teach how to approach to the sources. There is, for Heschel, a Jewish way of thinking, a Jewish way of learning, and if you don't know how to read the sources, how to read the sources, you might lose the deep parts of the deep foundations of the content because you try to read it by non-Jewish way of reading. Yes, the challenge is to find what is the right way to read the text. The challenge, maybe it's right about every text that we try to read, not to read all the text by one way of reading, but to be sensitive to every text, to find his own way of writing, his own way of thinking, the way he asked the text, the writer, he asked us to read his words, and more generally about Judaism, about biblical thinking, rabbinic thinking, Hasidic thinking, as to every kind of text, every kind of culture, every kind of religion, to be sensitive to its own way of thinking. And I believe that maybe this is a deeper challenge of, if we want to save our tradition, our communities, the deep challenge is to save our way of thinking, not only our traditions, not only our costumes, but much more important, it's the way of thinking. If you save your way of thinking, you know how to look about new problems, how to continue your tradition to a new age, to a new times. So this is what Heschel said to this group of principles. And now let's came back to our book, these classes, A Passion for Truth, in which he wrote not only about the Hasidic ideas, but especially about the Hasidic way of learning Torah. Yes, there are people who say that, you know, if you want to learn, go to a Litvak yeshiva. Yes, the Hasidim not know only how to dance, know how to learn. But for Heschel, Hasidism is first and foremost a new way of learning. This is the alternative of Hasidism. This is the transformation that Hasidism suggests us. Let's read the next paragraph. Anyone else wants to read? Anyone?
I'll read.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Hasidim is falsely reproached for having disparaged the value of Torah study. It merely belittled the view that studying Torah was enough. The Baal Shem Tov restored and strengthened an old Jewish precept whereby learning without awe was of questionable value.
Yes, this is the first note of Heschel about the Hasidic way of learning, in which he criticized an approach about Hasidism as if Hasidism is disparaged the value of Torah study, and say Hasidism didn't disparage the value of Torah study. Yes, the best only created a new context in which Torah study was only part of this context. Yes, the context is the awe. Yes, the awe before God. And yes, studying Torah is only part of this context, is only mean to this end. The end is awe. And if you study the Torah and didn't experience and didn't experience awe by your learning, it's not a good study. Yes, real and deep studying of Torah has to be with the experience of awe before God. And this is the first note about yes, the Hasidism way of learning Torah. But let's continue, and Heschel deepen this understanding. What is this meaning of awe before God, Firat Shamayim? Let's continue, please. Can you read the next source, please? Thank you.
Torah study is a way of coming upon the presence of God, the Baal Shem taught. A man learning Torah should feel like a son who receives a letter from his father and is most anxious to know what he has to say to him. The letter is precious to him upon every rereading, as if his father stood there beside him. I, Anochi, the first word of the 10 Commandments, consists of 4 letters in Hebrew and forms an acrostic for the words, I give myself in written form. It is said in the Talmud, God has given himself in the words, and man must learn how to encounter him.
Yeah, thank you. As Heschel, of course, used the word man because this is from the 70s, but he talked about every human being, and what Heschel tried to suggest us here is to, when we come to read the Torah, not to read it only as a content as a body of knowledge, but as a letter. And the deep challenge of reading letter is to meet the writer in his words. Yes, the challenge is not to grasp the knowledge. The challenge is to meet the writer. Yes, this is a dialogical way of learning Torah. Yes, what is the presence of God? What is the meaning of God in these words? Yes, learning Torah is not only to take a book, with a brown cover, with gold letters and old Hebrew fonts inside, but in order that your learning be a Torah study, you have to meet the writer. You have to meet God in the words to understand why these words, why these ideas, why these sources of learning Torah is God sayings. Yes, why these religious ideas reflect God's perspective, reflected God's love, God's understanding, God's compassion. Yes, Emily, you have a question?
Yes.
Please.
A very long-standing question. So dialogue with God means what? Having a sense of God's presence, having an understanding of God as the giver of love and mercy, etc., etc., etc. Is that what dialogue means? Because let's leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. For Heschel, yes, Heschel believed that the meaning of the religious experience is to see the world, to see situations from God's perspective. What is the meaning of God's perspective? For example, Heschel believed that the strongest fight against racism is the understanding that from God's perspective, all human beings are brothers and sisters. There is a fellowship. God is like a parent who deeply loves all his children, and when you open yourself to this perspective, to this parently perspective, you feel this is the source, this is the secret of the fellowship between humans, between humanity. And another example, what is the meaning of creation? What is the meaning of see the world as creation? Creation is not only an ancient story, an ancient principle of faith, but creation is a way of see the world from God's perspective. To understand that you can't use the world for your own desire only because you are a human being and this is about the world. No, when you open yourself to God's perspective, you suddenly look at the world as a from radical amazement, with deep, you see the glory of the world, you feel an awe from, or reverence for the world. When you open yourself to God's perspective, you understand the world as creation. And another example, how to understand your own existence. When you open yourself to God's perspective, you understand that your own existence, you can't take your own existence for granted. Suddenly you understand that your own existence is a gift, that there is, how do you say, that there is a mission, that God's anticipated that you will do something with will do something good with your life, something meaningful. The deep passion of human beings for meaning stems from this perspective, this God perspective. When you understand your existence not from your own perspective, but as a gift, with hope, with anticipation. Yes, do you understand what I try to say? And now when you come to read the Torah, when you come to learn Torah, you always have to ask yourself how this God's perspective present in this mitzvah, in this story, how this God's anticipation from human existence, how this God's anticipation from creation, from the creation, from the world, from us as human beings, all these perspectives is your questions when you read the Torah. Yes, what there were only examples. Yes, but how these sources of our tradition open myself to another perspective, to a deep meaning. This is the presence of God as I understand it. This is the meaning of God's perspective, of the dialogue between the human perspective and the perspective of God. Yes, Heschel is a very what will be the word, radical rabbi. Yes, but this is the transformative Hasidism. Yes, to transform yourself, to open yourself, to live in a dialogue, in a dialogical existence between you, the human perspective, and God's perspective. Emily, it was. It was a good question, a good answer to your question, I hope.
Yes, it was very good and very thorough. I just want to say, and maybe you'll cover this in the future, lectures, but always the key challenge for me has been the existence of suffering. And how do we come to terms with that? So I don't want to take you away from what you want to discuss today, but that's the bottom line for me always, period.
My next class will be about this issue. I already prepared it.
Oh, good.
I will bring Hasidic stories which Heschel collected about suffering, by which Heschel tried to how do you say it? Try to ask about the meaning of the Holocaust. Yes, the Hasidic stories were told before the Holocaust by for Heschel. I will show this is the way in which he tried to answer the question of the Holocaust. So this will be our next class.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for me, the next source is the most important. And Evie, may you read? Do you want to read? It's
It's a bit
very
small. It's a bit small for me.
okay.
Yeah.
So maybe another one want to read, or want?
Is anyone able? If not, I'll open it in another. Is
No,
anyone
no.
able to read?
Emily, please.
Emily, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Persuaded that one should be capable of learning more from people than from books, the Baal Shem Tov sought to add a personality dimension to the study of the Talmud, a great part of whose contents consists of views of sages cited by name. He urged students to seek communion with the sages, as well as comprehension of their ideas. Thus, it was maintained that while learning Abaya said, or Rava said, one should see Abaya and Rava as well as understand their utterances. One had to live with them, to enter their minds and souls, not to just grasp their thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, this is a very meaningful way of learning. And, you know, we, since the 60s, the Western, you know, we don't believe, our atmosphere doesn't believe in the chance to meet the writer. Yes, there were French philosophers in the end of the 60s, Foucault and Barthes, etc., who declared that the author dead. Yes, that everyone understands the text in his own way of reading, and there is no chance, there is no such a way to understand the intention of the writer. And here the best urges students to communion with the sages, to not only comprehend their ideas, but also to meet them, to open your understanding to their own understanding. When you say the name of Abaye, of Rava, you should see them before your eyes, namely to see yourself from their own eyes. Yes, this is the challenge, the dialogical challenge of learning. Yes, to meet the writer. Of course, not to grasp the writer, not to control the writer, but to be in a dialogical meeting in which, of course, you bring yourself, you bring your own perspective. This is our nature, but also to be in attentiveness to the perspective of the writer. Here we see not only the challenge of, I don't know what is the deeper challenge, to open ourselves to God's perspective, but to be, you know, in a dialogue between us, between the two students who learn together, between the writer and the reader. Yes, this is a hermeneutical approach of reading text. And Heschel brought us here this way of interpretation as a saying of the Baal Shem Tov. Yes, and when you open yourself, may I say, when you open yourself to God's perspective, you understand that we all are His children, and there is a meaning to see how is your dialogue with God, how was my dialogue with God, how God's presence has a different reflections. Yes, and this is why when you open yourself to God's perspective, you feel the demand to hear the voice of your friend, to understand the perspective of the writer, to be in a dialogue not only with God, but also with us, the community of the generations. Yes, Abai and Rava lived in Babylon more than, how do you say, 1500s. Yes, 1000 and yes, they lived around yes 500 after yes the world. Anyway, yes, and this is a deep challenge to meet their intentions, to meet their perspective. You know, you have to understand who were this what was their personality. Yes, if anyone who learn the Talmud know these names, Abai and Rava. This is the names that were mentioned in the Babylon Talmud more than anyone else. But how many readers of the Talmud remember that Abai was an orphan and that he was that he lived in another family who helped him, and now let's ask ourselves how this life how his experience was a foundation for his halachic saying. Yes, let's understand his personality. Let's try to meet him in his saying. You know, it's not about. I believe that it is right about every text. Yes, when you read, what is your favorite writer? Yes, what is your favorite book, romance? Yes, the challenge is to, when you write another romance of the same writer, suddenly, for me, I feel that I know this person. I know this writer. I understand something happened between him and me. I every book of him, of her that I read, I hear his voice again, even though it's another situation, other heroes of the story, but there is his own perspective in the text. And the Baal Shem Tov called his students to read the Torah, to read the Talmud in this way. To every time you meet Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah, do you remember that Rabbi Akiva grow in, he came from a converted family. Yes, he came from a family that were Gentiles and became Jews, and why he support the revolt against Roma, yes, and how this messianic saying of him, how his religious experience of the Song of Songs, how all this religious experience influenced his halachic saying. Let's meet his personality in his all sayings. Yes, this is what Heschel tried to do in his Hebrew book, Heavenly Torah, Torah Min HaShamayim. In his first volume, he collected a lot of sayings of Rabbi Akiva and a lot of sayings of Rabbi Ishmael, and tried to understand what is the deep perspective which was the foundation, the one foundation of all these sayings of Rabbi Akiva. Why his understanding of miracles? Why his understanding of the next world? Why is understanding of the body of God? All these topics, Heschel, every topic asks the same question: what is Rabbi Akiva personality? What is the Rabbi Akiva's perspective, which brought all these other ideas? Yes, what is his presence in all his sayings? But the most important work of Heschel in this way of learning was he showed it already in his book about the Bible, the prophets. Yes, did you read the prophets? You have to read it. This is the best book about the Bible, about the prophets. And in Heschel's introduction, it's a long introduction, but I quoted only parts of this introduction. He tried to guide his readers how to read the prophets, how to read the prophets, what his own interpretation, his own hermeneutics, his own way of reading the prophets. And let's read it. Yes, it was published. It was based on his dissertations that he published. In 1936. He wrote it. He wrote it in Berlin and published it in Krakow. But when he translated it to English by himself and edited it and added a lot of chapters and examples, he added also a new introduction in which he explained his own way of writing, his own methodological approach. And if you read it carefully, you see how he used this Hasidic way of learning, which he explained only in 1972 in his book *A Passion for Truth* that we have just read, and he used this way of writing. Yes, this introduction is from 1962, when he published his English translation to his own dissertation. And let's read it carefully and see how this Hasidic way of learning was his own way of writing his dissertation in Berlin. Yes, let's read it. And who wants to take this hard mission? Anyone? Emily again? Thank you. I will take you to all my classes.
I'm always ready to read. I'm a retired English professor, so I'm happy to read. Prophecy is not simply the application of timeless standards to particular human situations, but rather an interpretation of a particular moment in history, a divine understanding of a human situation. Prophecy then may be described as exegesis of existence from a divine perspective. Understanding prophecy is an understanding of an understanding rather than an understanding of knowledge. It is exegesis of exegesis. It involves sharing the perspective from which the original understanding is done. The spirit of exegesis, such exegesis, makes it incongruous for our inquiry to take refuge in the personal question, however vital, what did the prophets mean to us? The only sensible way of asking the personal question is to be guided by another more audacious question. What do the prophets mean to God? All of the questions are absurd unless this one question is meaningful. For prophecy is a sham unless it is experienced as a word of God swooping down on man and converting him into a prophet. Pure reflection may be sufficient for the clarification of what the prophet's consciousness asserts, but not for what his existence involves. For such understanding is not enough to have the prophets in mind. We must think as if we were inside their minds. For them to be alive and present to us, we must think not about what in the prophets with their not about, but in the prophets with their concern and their heart. Their existence involves us. Unless their concern strikes us, pains us, exalts us, we do not really sense it. Such involvement requires accord, receptivity, hearing, sheer surrender to their impact. Thought is like touch, comprehending by being comprehended.
Thank you very much. Do you see how this introduction is very close to how Heschel described the Hasidic way of learning? Yes, the Besht guided his students to say Abaye and to meet Abaye, and Heschel was a student of the Besht when he wrote his dissertation in Berlin. Yes, he took this way of learning, this Hasidic way of learning, this dialogical way of learning, and use it in his biblical study. Yes, he tried to meet the prophets, because prophecy is trying to hear God. Yes, the prophets were human beings who opened their minds and hearts to God's perspective. This is the secret, unbelievable saying of the prophets. We try to convey you God's feelings, God's understanding of history, and why we have the courage to say such sayings, because it is not sayings of us. This is God's perspective. This is God's understanding of history, and because this is the secret of the Bible, the only way to understand it is you can't understanding as a body of knowledge, because this is not only a body of knowledge, this is a very unique way of understanding. And the only way to understand understanding is by that if you success to get into this way of understanding. In order to understand knowledge, you can understand knowledge by any kind of way of thinking that you want. But the only way to understand understanding is to open yourself to this way of understanding. Yes, maybe we can take an example from Harry Potter. Yes, the only way to understand Harry Potter is to open yourself to the presence of magic in the world. To forget your modernity, your rational understanding, and for one moment, you not have to believe in magic before you read the text, and you don't have to believe in magic after you read Harry Potter. But if you don't believe in magic during your reading, if you don't open yourself, if there is no one moment in which during your reading you became Hermione, yes, you read the stories of J.K. Rowling. If you don't for one moment forget yourself and get into this world, you can't understand it. But maybe it's right saying about any, maybe, movie. There are people that you don't want to see movies with them. They only know to destroy movies. You have such friends that you don't want to see movies with them. What is the best way to destroy movie? To ask questions during the movie. Why these questions destroy the movie? Why this person, this friend, or you are this friend? Why this friend always asks questions during the seeing of the movie? Because he's afraid that the movie will capture him or her. But this is the secret of good movie, that it captures you. That from one moment you forget yourself and become one of the heroes, and become and get into the movie. This is why we don't want to see movies with such friends. Who is the friend who destroy our reading of the Bible? For example, Maimonides, the Rambam, always ask questions during reading the Bible. No, please don't ask you questions. It's a good for the second reading, but in the first reading, Heschel called us to use this Hasidic way of learning and let us get into the soul of the prophets. For one moment, to become Jeremiah. For one moment, to become Moshe Rabbeinu. For one moment, to be in the story, to be in the experience. Because prophecy is not only a saying of God. Prophecy is God's perspective, God's understanding. And the challenge of understanding is to, as he wrote, yes, unless their concerns strike us, pains us, exalt us, we don't really sense it. Yes, you need to be in receptivity, sheer surrender to their impact. Yes, this is a way of understanding. We are Western. Our regular understanding is by control. All our education try to help us to be in control of the text, control of the knowledge. Yes, but the Hasidic way of learning is an opposite way of understanding, way of learning. Don't try to control the knowledge. This is not good way of understanding experiences. When you learn science, of course, you have to be in control of the knowledge. But when you try to understand experiences, when you try to understand perspectives, when you try to meet the writer, yes, the challenge is not to be in control. The challenge is to be in sheer surrender, to let their own perspective to get into you, to hold you, to take you into their own soul. Maybe this is the challenge in every meeting. Yes. What is the secret of meet another human being? To let him ask the questions, to let his perspective to open your heart. Yes. And did we lose the way of meeting another person? Yes, in our postmodern age, we don't believe anymore in meeting, in the option to meet another person. Yes, this is own truth. I have my own truth. There is no chance to meet his own perspective. No, the best taught Heschel, and Heschel tried to invite us. Believe in the chance of meeting. Believe, please believe in the chance of open yourself to another way of thinking, to God's perspective, to other human beings' perspective. Yes, this is a very deep challenge, maybe endless challenge. There is no end to this journey, but at least Heschel tried to suggest us this challenge, this Hasidic transformation, self-transcendence in order to respond to the perspective of the other. And maybe let's read maybe questions or another source, the last one. Yes, Emily, our reader, please. This is from Heschel's Yiddish book. He wrote one book in Yiddish about Hasidism. Kotsk. It was never translated into English, never published in English, but someone sent me trying to translate it. Let's read this translation. I changed it. I added. So I changed parts of this. I hope it's good enough. And thank you.
I'll read it in a second. I just wanted to say there are so many implications to what you're saying. And one of them is pedagogic, because it seems to me that I've just started to study Talmud, and I don't know who these people are. And in teaching Talmud, we need to have the biographical information about who these people are. I think that should be thought about. Whoever teaches Talmud might consider including that. Other things to say, but I'll read.
Maybe may I say a response to your saying? One of the secrets of the Talmud is the dialogue between all the persons.
Right.
You have to go from one perspective to another perspective here and time and again, and this is how the Talmud tried to develop this hermeneutics, to open yourself one time from this perspective and one time from another perspective. But of course, when you understand who was these persons, it's much more deep. Yes, please read.
And what a contrast to contemporary cancel culture, but we'll put that aside. Anyone who researches Hasidism only on the basis of literary sources and doesn't draw from its oral Torah is relying on artificial material and overlooks genuine living springs. Hasidism cannot be researched without oral Torah, and shimush talmei chachamim, living with sages and learning from their behavior. Hasidic literature is a translated literature, and the translations are not always successful. In order to understand Hasidism, one must learn how to hear and to understand among people who are living Hasidism.
Thank you. Here Heschel disputed with scholars of Hasidism who try to understand Hasidism from outside, from very harsh, scholastic way of research. And Heschel calls them, please, Hasidism is an experience, is an experience. And you can't understand experience from outside. Yes, you have to be shimush talmidei chachamim. This is an ancient way of, an ancient Jewish way of learning, to be with the rabbi, to live with him, to eat with him, to meet him during the life, not only during his classes. Please come to Israel and meet me in the streets. Yes, but or may I come to the US? But yes, this Zoom is not a good way of learning. You have to be in a real dialogue to meet the teacher and to meet the students. And Heschel said it especially about Hasidism, about the Hasidic literature. Yes, as you know, the rabbis, most of the rabbis, didn't write their own books. They only saying during Shabbos, and then after Shabbos, one of the students translated this Yiddish sayings that the rabbi said during the Shabbos to Lashon HaKodesh, yes, to the rabbinic Hebrew after Shabbat, and this is translated literature. The challenge is to meet the living saying of the Rebbe, to meet him during the Kiddush, to meet him during the prayer, to meet him in the street, yes, and to meet him with his children, yes, and this is living Hasidism, and the only way to understand living is to meet the writer, and so don't try to understand experiences or Hasidic literature from outside. The deeper scholar is not one who only sit in libraries with books, but someone who get into the shuls, someone who try to understand the environment of the rabbis, someone who went to Poland to understand the trees of the rabbis around the house of the rabbis, to understand, to meet today as the rabbis, to understand, to speak with people who live this way of thinking, and this is the only way to understand, not only from books, but first and foremost from people. I don't know if you know Heschel educational saying, we don't need, you know the saying, educational saying of Heschel, we don't need a textbook, we need text people. The challenge is to be a present teacher, and not only someone who knows to read from the books, who knows to read from the books. So our class today was about how Heschel understands the Hasidic way of learning and how we use this way of learning to understand the Bible, to understand the Talmud, and how we call us to live in a dialogical way of living, dialogical way of thinking, that for Heschel, this is the secret of the Jewish way of thinking. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you very much.
And I hope to meet you in our next class, in which we will speak about Hasidic stories about suffering and how Heschel used these stories in order to respond to the Holocaust. Thank you, Evie.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Dror, and thank you, everyone else who joined us today. Thank you for being part of our learning community. I am looking forward to seeing you next class. Also, just a few announcements before we leave today. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., we will continue our class with Rabbi Ziering on how social media interacts with the major redemptive mitzvot of the holiday season, Shuvah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. And also tomorrow as well at 8 p.m., we have a class with Rabbi Silver exploring the readings of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Next week we have 3 new classes starting. So just as always, you can go and take a look at our schedule for Elul Zman at elul.drisha.org. And yeah, I hope to see you in all of our upcoming classes.